To maintain geographic authority over thousands of square miles, a Bronze Age ruler had to project an absolute, uncounterfeitable visual hierarchy. Standard currencies like gold and silver failed this requirement because they were highly liquid and easily circulated. Mid-level merchants and regional governors could simply hoard them. When a successful trader can accumulate the exact same physical wealth as a king, gold loses its power to signify an exclusive tier of authority. The state required a Veblenkud, an asset that derives its value and desirability explicitly from the inefficiency required to acquire it. Rome eventually tightened its sumptuary laws until the color was restricted by the state. Under Alexander Severus, wearing these silk garments was a privilege granted by the emperor. No foreigner was permitted to purchase them. True imperial power required a visual marker of hierarchy that was physically and economically impossible for lower classes to counterfeit. The Phoenicians extracted this prestige from the jagged rocks of the Levantine coast. To produce a true, color-fast purple, ancient dyers had to trigger a complex photochemical reaction, yielding an organobromine compound called 6,6-dibromo-indigo. The singular biological bottleneck for this compound was the mucus secretion of the hypobranchial gland, found inside predatory murex sea snails. Because these snails lived in deep coastal waters, laborers set baited traps from floats, pulling them up to extract the mucus drop by drop. The input-output math on this ledger reveals why the good was so costly. Crushing 10,000 murex snails yields precisely 1.4 grams of pure dye, enough to color only the hem of a single garment. Tyrian Purple's valuation was a direct macroeconomic function of the biological inefficiency required to extract it. To meet the demands of Mediterranean elites, the Phoenician city-states of Sidon and Tyre transformed their coastlines into industrial zones. The extraction process required crushing thousands of marine organisms in stone vats and leaving them to putrefy under the sun. The ensuing decomposition generated a stench so pervasive that ancient authors noted its presence across the city. The Talmud even granted women the right to divorce husbands who became dyers after marriage. To manage the odor, the Phoenicians enforced strict civic zoning. Sidon's primary production workshop was moved to Sarepta, 14 kilometers south of the city. The scale of this waste is visible in shell deposits like those found at Sidon, where discarded remains created a mountain 40 meters high. The wealth of Phoenicia was built on a putrid industrial complex designed to synthesize biology into capital. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder documented the exact biochemical protocol used in these factories. Laborers extracted the hypobranchial glands, added salt to the mash, and steeped it for 3 days. The mixture was then boiled in tin or lead vessels for 10 days. As the liquid reduced, it shifted into a dark, blackish, clotted blood hue. Managing this process required chemical mastery. Phoenician dyers manipulated reduction and oxidation sequences through a multi-day fermentation process, adding secret ingredients to hit the most prized color of all. They utilized proprietary techniques like double dipping, blending the indigo dye from one snail species with the purple-red dye of another to create a deep purple that appeared crimson when held to the light. This fragment of the Shroud of Charlemagne demonstrates the durability of the final product. Even 180 years after manufacture, the color remained bright and resistant to fading. The Phoenicians industrialized a biochemical reaction that transformed perishable organic matter into permanent capital. That capital was refined in the mercantile counting houses of Tyre, where the dye was fully commodified. The Phoenicians operated as a disciplined cartel. They exported the dyed cloth worldwide, but kept the extraction process secret, maintaining total control over the supply chain to enforce artificial scarcity. Diocletian's price edict from 301 CE provides hard data for this pricing power. It shows that 1 pound of purple dye cost 150,000 denarii. In the currency of the time, this meant a single pound of dye was worth approximately 3 pounds of solid gold. The Tyrian brand saturated imperial luxury markets. It was used to dye parchment for high-status texts, projecting wealth before a single word was read. Tyrian Purple operated as an engineered financial instrument with a permanently fixed price floor. On a macroeconomic scale, the dye served a crucial geopolitical function. Phoenicia was a confederation of city-states surrounded by expansionist empires like Assyria and Babylon. They faced a severe military disparity. To maintain their leverage, the cartel expanded extraction sites to colonies like Carthage. This scaled production while keeping the chemical monopoly centralized. The scarcity of the dye funded a global maritime network, paying for the fleets and infrastructure that smaller city-states otherwise couldn't afford. Massive empires possessed the military capacity to sack Tyre. However, they needed the Phoenicians operational to supply the prestige commodity that validated their own rule. The Phoenician cartel maintained their maritime influence through economic indispensability. They held a monopoly on a commodity so critical to imperial legitimacy that expansionist kings often accepted the dye as tribute rather than risking the destruction of the industry.